Then we move on to the next presentation from Mr. Henk Ovink. Henk is a special envoy for the international water affairs for the Netherlands, Kingdom of the Netherlands. He is also Sherpa to the high-level panel that's formed by the UN General Secretary and the World Bank. And he recently was awarded an honorary membership of the Royal Institute of Engineers. I am honored to invite Henk to, to give his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. How are you? Slept well? Got up in the rain last night? Lots of water, yesterday in Cairo. We were caught in the rain too, in the traffic, of course. But a colleague of mine was in a car for 7 hours. Okay, not a good idea. So water and climate are not abstract, right? They're around. And our youth knows this very well. They call on us on the world. Also here in Cairo, you had a Cairo marathon, youth running for climate. They call on us to take action for a reason, because climate is real. And we lag behind in everything we do. And this is not a problem of Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Europe, Latin America in itself. No, this is a global issue. And we have to work together on this. And we need to know, So, luckily we have the IPCC. And the IPCC a year ago came with their 1.5 report. And the 1.5 report was asked for by UNFCCC, the UN. Because in Paris, in 2015, we said, the world better not warm up more post-industrial levels than 2 degrees. But in the Paris Agreement, it also said, but better 1.5. But it's a very complex thing to say, as the world said. Let's do 2, but if we can, 1.5. But no clue. And of course, it was all political, because the 0.45 were exactly there, too high a cost for the rest of the world, too risky for the ones too vulnerable, the difference. But what was the difference? So IPCC came up with a report, and the report said the difference is massive. And we have to act now, and the window of opportunity is now. So our scientists say, yes, we can, if only we change. Second report, IPCC this spring, on climate change and land, on what we do with our land. Agriculture, urbanization, planning, infrastructure. We disrupt our biodiversity, and that was in line with the IPBES report telling us that biodiversity is down the drain in everything, so more vulnerability on top of that. And just recently, and especially of interest of low-lying countries, deltas like you have in Egypt, like we have in the Netherlands, because I hardly live in the Netherlands, but I come from the Netherlands, vulnerable deltas, the IPCC came the ocean report saying that, well, sea level rise might be off the charts too. So whatever report comes out, it tells us it is worse. Now this climate crisis is not abstract, as said. You're caught in the rain last night, we are caught in disasters every day. And if you Google or whatever search engine you use on your phone or a computer, you'll find a disaster every day. You'll find multiple disasters. Floods and droughts and extreme heats and fires. Fires are everywhere, every day. And after the drought, it's the immediate flood. And you see examples from 2018. I could do examples for 2019 or 2017. Every year is more extreme, and these extremes are hitting us in the extreme places. Philippines, the typhoon, the droughts in Africa, the wildfires in California, and the floods in Japan. Now, what does it mean for our future? And who of you knows a little bit about the Netherlands? Do you know where it is? It's in Europe, eh? Okay. It's this low-lying country. And we're doing research on the Netherlands. It's pretty deformed on this map. It looks more beautiful here. But all the drawings in there are our efforts in the next 200 years to prevent the Netherlands from flooding. And we failed in this scenario. I'm not saying we will, but it tells us our vulnerability. The Netherlands is a low-lying place, like so many low-lying places. And if we want to prevent this scenario from happening, we have to take action now. And it's mitigation, 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 while at the same time adapting to this changing climate. Egypt is also very vulnerable when it comes to climate. In the top 3 most vulnerable regions affected by climate change. This is not the top 3 you want to be part of, right? You want to be part of the champions, not of the ones that are vulnerable. Flooding and low-lying coastlines, intensity and frequency of storm events, sea level rise submerges, 20%, a meter of sea level rise will submerge 20% of the delta, salinization, and so forth. And then you have population growth, as in so many places, in your most vulnerable part. So, to get there, we have to understand the problem. When I was appointed by the Dutch cabinet as a water envoy, I also said, okay, what is water and climate, water and urbanization, water and health and security? What are those relationships and can we put them on the map? Yes, we can. There's a geography to it, because everything has a geography. Everyone has a place to live, raise crops, children, develop a business, and in that place, things come together. It's the physics that bring it together. So there's a geography also to droughts and floods. And what is a scary image is that on the top right, you see all the floods in the time 1996-2015. 20 years of floods. And it's an interesting chart because it actually tells us that floods are very democratic. Every country has a flood, or 2, or 3, or 4. No distinction, so we're all vulnerable to floods. But the top-down chart tells us who is impacted by the floods. And then all of a sudden, it shows that floods are not democratic at all. They choose the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable are hit the hardest in those most vulnerable places. In this case, parts of Asia. And when it comes to drought, you see the same thing. There's a concentration of vulnerability as there is a fragmentation or a disperse of these events across the world. Now, cities are often the places where it comes together. Why cities? Because we all want to live there, because we invest our money there, because we raise our children, build our education institute. This is where our infrastructure lies. So if we put everything together in a place and we call it a city or a metropolitan region, this is also where vulnerability increases. And one part of that vulnerability is money. Right? It's the financial part. OECD, World Bank did a research, Stefan Hallegatte, and assessed assets at risk in 2050 because of sea level rise, storms and surges. And they add up to the trillions. So there's a long list of cities. You see Miami topping the list, then Guangzhou, New York, New Orleans. You also see a hotspot in the Netherlands. And it's 2 circles actually. It's Amsterdam and Rotterdam. If you add them up, we're in the top 4 of the world's most vulnerable places when you look at assets. The Nile Delta is there as well. So places at risk with assets. The scary thing of this image is Africa, because this is 2050. Africa probably will have doubled in population size, but this is only looking through a financial lens. And if money is the only driver for change, the more vulnerable of the world will lose out. We have to invest not only in finance, in projects, we have to invest in people. Because there's an unequal risk when it comes to floods and droughts. Vulnerable people are hit hardest by floods and drought, have a harder time to get back on their feet. So it's a triple complexity. Second, third, so next to finance, it's social and people, and then third, it's our environment, our biodiversity. Goes down the drain with these increased water risks coupled with climate change. IPBES report of this spring tells us that it's going the wrong way and that we have to get back on track. Now for that, the world agreed on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, right? This is the best agenda we have. 17 goals that together can help us reform this world into a better place. 17 goals that also are a comprehensive agenda, an agenda of inclusion, an agenda of transformation. If only we deliver on this promise, and if only we connect across the SDGs all those interlinkages, because that is critically important. And with the SDGs, we agreed to the Paris Agreement, where we said 2 degrees, better 1.5, let's better 1.5. We're nowhere close in reaching these goals. But these agendas should help us drive forward. These agendas really make it possible that the future is better. But then we have to change. Our business as usual is not only not enough, it is lethal. It's killing people every day across the world, killing biodiversity, and making our places, our invested infrastructure, more vulnerable. Now, to put it on a chart why it's also very complex is that the challenges become bigger. If you look 50 years ago, the billions of people of the world are in no comparison to the billions we have now, and if the estimates are right, the billions will be off the charts. So we are a populous world where challenges exacerbated by climate change are only increasing. So if you look ahead, so if you think we are a little bit here, 2019, and you look ahead and you might think, will I wake up tomorrow? It's a lot, we have to do a lot. So a lot, what is happening in the world is that we look back. A lot of politicians you see, populism is in the rise, and they say, 1950, wasn't that a nice time? We only had to take on 2 challenges. Everything was nice. Somebody made it complex, but let's blame somebody else. But the future and that complexity are not awful at all. They're the inspiration of the youth. That complexity in their interdependency, in these interlinkages, is actually the only way forward. It's the future that we want to live in, not the past. So in the context of climate, we should not respond to the past. We should act upon the future. We should be proactively engaging in that future. So instead of what we currently are doing, investing in stupid infrastructure, pushing the climate crisis and the SDG crisis ahead of us, being non-responsive from crisis to crisis, what we often try to do is be reactive. When there's a crisis, a flood, a drought, at least we respond. But the only reference then is the crisis in the past. We have to become proactive. We have to understand that future, plan accordingly, and invest. If we are able to understand, plan, and invest, we will be able to be proactively engaging in that future. And water is key. Now, I'm a water ambassador, a water envoy, so of course I think water is key, otherwise I won't, be doing my job right, you would say. Can we trust the guy? But water is key, and you know this. Water is critical for health. With bad water, health costs go up, death among youth and elderly people go up. Bad water also causes with babies growth issues, not only impacting their physical growth, but also their mental growth. And when that happens when you're very young, there's no pill once you get 12, so you're lagging behind for the rest of your life. Water is an equity and equality issue. It's women and kids that walk the wells every day for hours across the world. These women can't participate in their economies, in their communities, while they actually drive these economies and communities if they could. So you take their opportunity away, increasing inequality. At the same time, you take the opportunity of the communities away, and the kids can't go to school. And without sanitation facilities in school, the girls are monthly dropouts. So water is social, and water is environment. Polluted water increases biodiversity loss. And water and climate actually increases biodiversity vulnerability. And water is economy because it destructs our cities, our economies. Without water, with drought, the impact on the GDP is everlasting. An immediate impact on GDPs with floods is massive across the world. So water is connected through all these SDGs. It's social, environmental, cultural, and economic. It's about us. And that makes water so powerful. But then we have to think about it differently. We have to think about the long term. Really think ahead, 2030 and 2050. Connect the dots across social, cultural, environmental, and economic issues. And come up with plans and strategies that work in the context of the SDG and the Paris Agreement. But plans are books on the shelf. So if those plans are not connected to projects on the ground, that better be transformative, holistic in their action, catalytic in their impact, then it won't help. So the project needs the plan as well as the plan needs the project. And we can only do this together. When the plan and the project are in place, we can only do this together inclusively, including everyone. And that is tough, because it's great to invite your neighbors and friends. It's a little bit tougher to invite the ones you disagree with. And the unknown is even tougher. But an inclusive process really is critically important to build that capacity, that understanding that is needed to get projects implemented. And transparency with that, for that enabling environment to learn, to be accountable as governments, but to also be accountable as businesses for the business case. So that enabling environment is as important as the projects in place. We have billions in our hands as a world. Our financial institutes, the development banks, governments, businesses have billions to spend on business cases. And still today, the business case of stupid infrastructure is easy. The more complex the projects are, the harder it is to get the money on the ground. And that means that next to investing in projects, we have to invest in people. An enabling environment that makes it possible to get that understanding there, the planning in place, the progress of this more comprehensive approach. Collaboration is critically important. And then consistency. We have to stay in place. Developing complex projects takes time. The Netherlands was not built in 10 years. Egypt was not developed in 1,000. A sustainable and a sustainability agenda in the context of climate will not be realized in a year. So we have to stick to our promise and not reinvent one every year. We have to stick to our promise, be stubborn and consistent. Focus on that capacity of all, not only institutions, but also the individuals. And stay committed, while being cross-cutting. Catalytic approaches to spur action in the context of climate. So popular said, we need to invest in this process. Millions to spend billions right. And that is tough. Try to find the millions with the banks. You'll find the billions, but not the millions. Convince the financial sector to invest in the process up front, in people, to ensure that there's an enabling environment that lasts during the implementation and way beyond. So there's stewardship and ownership and institutional capacity. And if you invest in the process, the economists say we maximize opportunities in the beginning, so we know more and better, while the performance of our interventions are better. So we have to invest in people. We need to change the billions with the hearts and minds. Now, due to time, well, the Netherlands, great place. It's a low-lying delta. Do you recognize it? I put it on its side, so it looks a little bit like Bangladesh. All the water flows down. This is how you feel. Low-lying, a third below sea level, two-thirds is actually flood-prone. We changed the dynamics, but not overnight. It took us 1,000 years, and it did not start with engineers. It actually started with deliberation, conversation, and collaboration. In the 12th century, we built our first water democracy with our water authorities, and those are still the fourth layer in our constitution in the country. A place where we come together to talk about water, to invest in water, and to connect across all sectors to ensure that there's a sustainable future. We invested in our cities, we connected water to health, already in the 19th century. So our housing law is not only about social housing, but freshwater supply and sanitation. WASH was there already in the 1900s. 53, our most famous disaster with almost 2,000 people lost that now made us famous with all these delta works. But at the same time we were inventing and reinventing how to build with nature instead of only with hard infrastructure to protect our coasts, to protect our rivers and to protect our cities. So our water is embraced as a threat and opportunity. The threat to understand and connect it to economic, social and cultural issues, the opportunity to invest better and prepare for our future. And we institutionalize this with the Delta Commissioner, a commissioner by the government who runs a program for the next 100 years, and we're now looking ahead at 2300 to understand and be ready and prepared in protection, plan our countries, our cities accordingly, and yes, be ready when a disaster strikes. And that means that an enabling environment, the social capacity, has to be critically linked to institutional capacity too. It is one of the same kind. And institutional capacity is not only government, it is governance where also public and private sector align. Now we do that in the Netherlands, but we also do this across the world. We try to do this with everything, so we build a coalition of countries, deltas, where Egypt is a proud member of. Last year we had the ministerial here in Cairo. Next week the ministerial will be in Tokyo. A coalition of countries that is not a limited coalition, but is on a voluntary base, to exchange knowledge, practices, but also agree on principles in the context of an urban agenda, a Paris Agreement, or the SDGs. We helped launch the high-level panel on water, which I'm a Sherpa to, with this funny hat. We started a global commission on adaptation with a global center on adaptation with the first base in Rotterdam and Groningen, the Netherlands, and now bases in Beijing, Miami, Dhaka, and Santiago de Chile, and hopefully another place here in Africa, as well as in Southeast Asia. A center that is spearheaded by a commission that is chaired by former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Bill Gates and Kristalina Georgieva, presented their flagship report during the Climate Week in New York, aiming at 3 revolutions. 1, the revolution to plan, to understand better. Again, understand the complexity around climate adaptation. 2nd, to plan accordingly, connecting long-term to short-term. And 3, to start to invest in adaptation aggressively. Part of the report is our tracks that focus where we can make impactful change on the long run in a year of action that will lead up to a climate adaptation summit next year in Amsterdam on October 22nd. And I'm proud to say there's also a water action track. A track that really focuses on the environmental system, the system of our planet, as well as the economic system, the system of humans. Trying to connect those 2 systems in looking at preparedness measures, resilient basins, and resilient cities. With the action track, there's a whole range of partners. And again, not limited, anyone can join, but this list of partners is critically important to drive actions forward, impactful, put them on the summit agenda, present them to the world, replicate and scale them up for accelerated action and accelerated impact. Changing the world starts with projects. Projects come from people. We need those places, those projects, and those people with transformative capacity. Now, part of the work that we do in Africa is very much data-driven and data-based. We connect satellite data, programs, and enabling an environment in a water, peace, and security initiative. Really looking at droughts, transboundary water issues, and being on the ground, connecting that understanding with that data, with the people in the most vulnerable places. We help farmers through mobile phones, when to irrigate, when to spray, and when to sow, all thanks to these data. Work together with FAO on this water production open access portal, where we can help translate all the data on the ground again to empower every farm holder, smaller or big, to ensure that they know what to do, when to do, and what to do it. Next to that, we need the projects on the ground. And based on my experience in New York, I started a challenge in Asia. And the challenge in Asia, we are exploring how we can bring the challenge to Africa. We assessed the region in all its vulnerabilities, identified 3 hotspots that were key: Chennai in India, Khulna in Bangladesh, and Semarang in Indonesia, and started to understand the water cycle system. I take one out as an example, and then I stop. This is Chennai. The current system of scarcity in Chennai, and you've read the papers perhaps this summer, Chennai, the second city to run dry, is because the water is taken from afar. Chennai is now far off of her, you could say, normal water cycle. So there's a lot of water with floods and long periods of droughts. And Chennai people have to take the water from far away. And on top of that, they waste. And the water gets polluted and gets back into the aquifer. But moreover, the aquifer is exploited. So all the water that's polluted goes into the ocean. And the ocean is now more polluted than ever. But because the demand grows, we build desalination plants by the dozen, increasing our carbon footprint and our costs. So it's a double whammy of not enough water while there actually is enough, an increased carbon footprint, and a dependency on finance because of massive loans from the MDBs. Well, if we look at a nature-based solutions perspective, there's more than enough water. We can reduce investment cost by 1/3 and operation costs by 1/2, and get to a sustainable Chennai with the existing water in place, even in scenarios of massive climate change. So this water-balanced city is possible if only changed. This is exactly what the IPCC researchers say. If only we dare to change our behavior, our investments, and the way we build our cities. Here we focused on the future, but also the past, really looking at temple tanks, religious places where we used to capture the water. We bring it back into the aquifer, and we're going to replicate it across. One example out of many. Last is, it's not so easy. There's a dire picture of the future, while there's an existing situation of investing in the wrong projects. Changing the hearts and minds of people starts with investing in people. But for every person on this planet, we know that that change will come with hardship. We have to offer something back. Second, there is no silver bullet. It's not that you can swallow a pill and tomorrow climate change is over. It's not that it's a bad dream. No, it's reality. So it really needs our persistency in working together. And I think 3, because this is not easy, it's complex, and we need persistency, it is all about collaboration. If we can continue to reach across isles, continents, borders, and rivers, we can come up with best solutions to solve this climate crisis together with water as a real leverage for that change. And if I look around the room, who of you is younger than 30? It's for you. Second, because we die anyway. Second, there's a challenge here. I want to make this very clear. We can never say that your protest and your call to action is an excuse for us to not act. This is not about us doing something for you. This is about us doing something for ourselves too. Inaction is not an option. Action is not only a burden, it's a massive inspiration because it comes with collaboration and the learning from all. Thank you.